What I have for you today is the follow-up on a case we discussed previously. It's now went to the French Conseil d'Etat, and it is the case of St. Dupont versus the French Tax Authority. Now, the case is a follow-up from what has been called one of the most important transfer pricing cases in 2022 from the Paris Appeal Court, in which Dupont was accused of profit shifting. We have discussed this case before, and I will put a link into the bottom of this discussion here. So just a reminder what was going on. We had the St. Dupont in France, which was held by D at the D in International in the Netherlands, which was ultimately held in Hong Kong, and Dupont in France had a marketing and distribution subsidiary in Hong Kong and in many other places as well. And Dupont France was loss-making, whilst the Hong Kong marketing and distribution center itself was profitable. And the French tax authorities said that there were profit shifting happening because Dupont Marketing Hong Kong did not pay the same price for the lighters and everything else that Dupont was making as what third parties did. So if we look at what the appeal court, Paris Appeal Court said, is that firstly, contrary to what St. Dupont maintains, the OECD transfer pricing guidelines do not provide the tested party cannot be the main contractor, or that only the RPM can be applied, because what Dupont did is they applied the RPM, residual profit method, to Dupont Marketing Hong Kong. And they said, you know, we benchmark this and this is totally fine. And what the French authorities said is, no, you've got internal cups. St. Dupont is selling the same stuff to other parties in Asia, and we do not understand why you sell it so much cheaper to St. Dupont Marketing, right? Secondly, the appeal court in Paris said that Dupont argues that the administration is comparing companies with different functional profiles. However, St. Dupont has not provided evidence to show that its resale prices were modulated according to wholesale and retail functions. And this touches one of the very basics of this case, where the court seems to express frustration with that whatever data Dupont provided, it was never sufficient. You know, the tax administration asked them to provide something, they didn't provide it on time, then they asked them to provide it again, they didn't provide it in the format that the tax administration asked, etc., etc. And this comes back to haunt Dupont all the way through this process. Now, whether this was simply bad will from the tax authorities and from the courts, which would be interesting, because then you have bad will from 4 parties in total, right? You've got the tax administration, the first court in Paris, the appeal court in Paris, and now the Supreme, or the Conseil d'Etat. That'll be a little suspicious. But anyway, thirdly, St. Dupont maintains that the administration did not consider a difference between geographical markets. But, and here it comes again, it does not provide any evidence to assess whether the difference between the markets would actually have an impact. And the same thing, Dupont maintains that the administration is comparing transactions whose volumes are not comparable. However, it does not follow from the tables attached to the proposed rectification that the prices were set based on quantities sold. So Dupont did provide some tables of regional sales in Asia, and then threw in Russia and the US and I think Brazil for good measure. And none of them showed that the prices were based on quantity sold, right? Fifthly, Dupont maintains that the inclusion of duty-free shop invalidates the comparative method, because they said that St. Dupont Marketing was not a duty-free shop, and therefore the pricing should have been different. However, by merely producing a mathematical analysis, St. Dupont, which does not propose any alternative correction, does not provide any relevant evidence. And I think this is another, I think this is quite an interesting list of don'ts for taxpayers. You know, don't not answer the question that the tax authorities have asked if you can answer it. Don't come with theoretical arguments like the OECD says you can only use RPM and this must be the tested party. And here also, you know, don't play with the numbers until they roll into a form that suits you, because the tax authorities may just play with the same numbers in a different way, which results in a form that does not suit you, right? Sixthly, St. Dupont maintains that administration did not consider the services attached to the products sold. However, it does not provide any evidence of support of its allegations to justify the existence, the scope, or the cost of such services, which doesn't help itself. And then the tax authorities did actually give a 50% discount. You will see there are two discounts that the tax authorities took. They said, you know, these are the internal prices, but then first they gave a 27% discount, I believe, for the difference between duty-free shops and Dupont Marketing Hong Kong. And then they gave another 50% discount on that discount, if I read the case correctly, and then made the assessment based on this heavily discounted price, right? And so the court here says, you know, the administration applied a 50% abatement, and that should be more than enough to consider the services attached to the product sold, if those services were even rendered. And then finally, the appeal court said ST Dupont maintains that its persistent losses and the persistent profits of ST Dupont Marketing can be explained by difficult economic context. However, these general allegations do not undo the administration's elements. Again, you should have come with more data. So let's see what happens before the Conseil d'État. First of all, there's an interesting argument here, which I've not seen before, and which is a bit of worrisome, and that is that the court says when the tax authorities carry out a tax audit of a company, they are entitled to exercise their powers of control and rectification in respect of the existence and the amount of loss carry forwards from previous financial years, even if time barred, which the company declares to have at the end of the financial year being audited. So what the tax authorities did, they said, look, your TP was wrong. You say you've got all these tax losses carried forward from periods of which the statute of limitation has already expired. But since the tax losses are declared in the year in which you got the TP wrong, we will simply adjust the tax loss going forward. Now this does feel like you're reaching beyond the statute of limitation, right? But apparently this is possible under French law. The court says it follows from the foregoing that the Paris Administrative Court of Appeal did not err in law in holding that the tax authorities had been able, without disregarding the rules of limitation, to call into question the amount of losses declared by the company in respect of the financial years between 2003 and 2008, because those were beyond the statute of limitation, right? And then the court makes an interesting statement. French lawyers will be able to put it better into perspective. It says the company cannot, moreover, usefully criticize the grounds on which the Administrative Court of Appeal dismissed its plea with regard to the loss carries forwards, since such a challenge could only be lodged by the court by way of a priority question of constitutionality. So apparently you can't appeal the assessment killing your loss carry forwards. You need to make another type of case saying that doing this is unconstitutional because you're in effect levying tax beyond the Constitution, something like that. But I think this is an interesting side issue which pops up in this case. I don't know if other countries have similar rules. If you do let me know. I would be interested in learning about that. A 10-second commercial. If you want to learn more about international taxation or transfer pricing, or treat yourself to an all-round update, or if you want your team to learn or stay updated, please visit my online courses. And then we come to the resale price that DuPont used, and then afterward the court addresses the internal cup that the tax authorities use. And the court, again, is not sympathetic. It says in the first place, by relying on the fact that the auditor had noticed that this company was incurring significant recurring losses without it having provided him with any information on its transfer pricing policy, the administrative court did not err in law. So I think what happened here was the court said, you know, we asked you information, you didn't give it, or the tax authorities did. You give us other information, but you didn't give us what we asked, and therefore we could make an adjustment. Secondly, in noting that the company had not provided any precise indication or concrete justification of its transfer pricing policy, and that it had not produced any figures with regard to the costs relating to the functions performed by its subsidiaries, and the similarity of the public prices for all the Asian countries, nor the precise documents as to the comparables used, the court made a sovereign assessment of the facts of the case, free from distortion. So you didn't give us any of this, then the court can decide what to do, and it can follow the pro forma assessment of the tax authorities. Thirdly, the court also did not distort the facts and the documents by noting that although the company had produced margin and sales tables by product type and by country, So it gave some things, but not what the tax authorities asked for. It had not provided data on the public prices charged by each of its subsidiaries in Asia for each product, nor had it produced and analyzed data on the comparables proposed located in the geographical areas outside Asia. Having ruled that the company had not sufficiently documented the resale price method, it was relying on the court was able, without any error of law, to deduce that the tax authorities had been entitled to disregard this method and that the company could not rely on this method. So I think what happened here was ST Dupont did not want the tax authorities to use internal cups. So it gave them all kinds of other information except the information that they asked for, right? Show us the products that you sold across Asia, who you sold them to and at what price for all of them. And then DuPont came and they gave these averages, and they gave, I think, for one or two products, but not all of them, the prices, because for those one or two products and for the one third party that they sold to, or maybe a few, it suited their narrative, but the others, one may assume, did not. Otherwise, why wouldn't you provide what they asked for, right? And then finally, the court looks at the TP method used by the French tax authorities. Now remember, the CUP and internal comparables are preferred over external indirect methods or profit-based methods. So the tax authorities already had a strong case going for them when they started, right? And the Conseil d'État say first the company criticized the method used by the tax authorities on the ground that ST Dupont Marketing and the Korean company SJ Duco were not comparable, and apparently the tax authorities compared them. In rejecting the criticism on the grounds, firstly, that SJ Duco's wholesale activity had been supplemented by that of exclusive sales agent and retailer, and secondly, that the applicant had not provided any evidence making it possible to assess the nature and cost of the differences in functions, the court did not err in law. Secondly, the court was able, without committing an error of law, to rely on the fact that ST Dupont's charter itself specified that retail prices were set uniformly by a continental zone. Yeah, if that is what your charter says, then it's difficult to argue that your TP policy dictates differently. Thirdly, the court noted on the one hand that it did not follow either from the tables attached, so again these tables that Dupont provided, to the rectification proposals that the prices charged by ST Dupont to its customers depended on the quantity sold. I mean, we've seen this argument before. And secondly, that the document produced by ST Dupont showing an overall statistical correlation between volume sold and unit price did not make it possible to establish this either. Again, don't show us broad general theory, but show us the narrow practical details is what the court says. Fourthly, it is clear from other statements in the judgment not criticized by the appeal, so I think the court says here, tongue-in-cheek cherry picking, that the court also based itself on the fact that the tax authorities had applied a 27% disc reduction, this is what I talked about before, to the prices granted to duty-free shops in order to take into account of the fact that these were only retailers as opposed to DuPont Marketing Hong Kong. Consequently, the grounds criticized by the company are superfluous, which is a very strong word. I'm not quite sure what the French word was, but superfluous is a very strong word to use. And fifthly, the Administrative Court of Appeal was able to dismiss the argument that account should have been taken of the fact that the prices charged to SJ Duco Co. included remuneration for services which for ST Dupont Marketing were invoiced separately. We saw this argument as well, right? So, and the Supreme Court repeats what the Appeal Court of Paris says. It says, on the grounds that in addition to the fact that these allegations were not supported by evidence, this circumstance had been taken into account through the 50% reduction applied by the tax authorities. And then the court logically concludes with saying ST Dupont's appeal is dismissed. I think this is an interesting case because one gets the impression that the court thought that ST Dupont used arguments of convenience without substantiating him, like difference functions, etc., and that such arguments must be explained, right? And somehow, I mean, one reads the case and you can either think, well, this is a very unwilling taxpayer, or this is a very antagonistic court, all four of them, or three of them, I should say, and maybe it is a bit of both, and I think what this case leaves one thinking is, how do you make sure that when you are in tax litigation, that you maintain good working relationships with both the tax authorities and with the courts, because it seems like the relationship on all these sides have gone horribly wrong. And I don't know if this was part of a litigation strategy, whether they had a lot to hide or not, but it does seem to have strongly backfired. This is what I have for you this week. I look forward to what we'll be discussing next week. If you have suggestions for cases that you would like me to discuss, anything from America to Africa and Asia or Australia, please send them to me. I would love to have a look at them. Bye for now.